So it's a bit rather than... Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, Reading Ideas. I've just finished Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her? 750 pages. So that's taken me a while. I bought this in a stack, and Arion of Book Zealots said, how about a read along, which is fantastic. So check out, I was going to say her channel, but it's a mother and son channel about reading books and you know America and various other things. Check out their channel, great stuff. Okay, so this has taken me some time to read. Now I'm trying to write myself. I've always loved reading, but now I'm kind of looking at books like this differently, to learn about the writing style, how it's constructed, tips, the tricks that they use. So it's been really good for that education. It's so looking at it that way, it has been brilliant. I got so much out of reading this book from that way, more I think than the actual story itself. So I'm just trying to think for what is best for you. So I will say what the book is, and then I'll do kind of a bit of a deconstruction. So if you don't want spoilers, then it is 750 pages, then obviously don't listen to the rest of it. So the type of book that it is like Victoriana, if you want to call it. It's of its time. Now, I didn't realise it was a thing, but apparently writers at the time were often paid by the word, and you can tell. It is long, it's very wordy, and if you like that style, then great. If you hate that style, then it's going to be a long ride. Now, I have to say, it is very competently written. He's a very competent author. But the style is that kind of old-fashioned style where there's plenty of words. If something can be said in 3 sentences rather than one, it's said in 3 sentences. Sometimes you can kind of see it a little bit and think, come on, you're just kind of trying to get a few extra pennies here. You will get a sentence and there's loads of adjectives in it, spreading it out. You will even get like a, when some people say that kind of pause in between sentences. Well, you get a little bit of that at times. You'll get a sentence part way through, there'll just be a little quip or an aside, and then it'll carry on, and you're kind of thinking, you're just trying to get a few more pennies, you. So it is quite verbose, and it's of its time. So it's ladies in corsets and dresses or whatever. There's horses and carriages. It's members of Parliament and that sort of thing. So it isn't. Yeah. So yeah, like I say, it's if this was a food, it'd be like porridge. It's substantial. It's you can get by on it, but it's not. There's no kind of. It doesn't have. It kind of pedestrian is, might be a bit too harsh, but there's no kind of like, great big emotional drops. It's not like a horror. There's no big emotional drops. It's not weird like science fiction, and it's not, like a Western. You're not getting Texas. You are getting, Victorian, gentry lifestyle. Now the style, if it's the type of book, if I said about talking about looking at it from writing, it's the type of book that if I would have read when I was younger, it would be like, I can never write. How, there's just so long, so much happening, so much detail. And when I came across Hemingway was the antithesis of this writing. he describes, and not just Hemingway but other writers at the time, describe disliking this type of writing. So we're going to cut out adjectives. We're not going to... How can I describe this book? It kind of happens in the writer's head. It's like somebody sat in a room, sits down at the typewriter. Oh, what could be a good Victorian romance? What could be a good strong female lead? What could be a romantic drama? Right, this. Not somebody kind of going out, living life. So it's a bit like a made-up novel in someone's head. The characters, I'll come on to the characters a bit later on, but there's not, so it's quite a dryish book. There's no smells in there, there's no tastes in there. It is, happening almost like, in people's heads. She said this, she thought that. It's... Yeah, I don't picture the characters very, very well. They're not described. George Vassover has got a scar on his face, and that's about as far as it goes. I don't know, I can't even remember if the characters are blonde, dark-haired, curly, straight, big lips, little lips. Not a lot of that kind of sticks. But like I say, it's very competently written. Now, at the start, some little things in there. At the start, the chapters are quite long, and it will kind of be at a kind of steady rhythm. And the last line of each of the first few chapters, he seemed to end on a bit of a flourish. So whether it was serialised and that was in there, but the book does kind of go on at a particular pace. There's a couple of changes of pace in the fox hunting chapter. There's another one when George is kind of going off the rails a little bit. Then that's kind of got a bit of a different atmosphere, but it kind of plods along. And this was it. Maybe you'll like this bit, but I'd be reading and just kind of like happily kind of reading along, if you like, and then the annoying person will come out with a good line, or there'll be something interesting, and you kind of have to kind of stop that, and you kind of think, oh, he's going to make me think now, and damn, he's done something interesting. Sorry, Anthony. So you kind of you could have just left me to plod along. Right, now the books and the characters. The main character, it says, is Alice Vassover, and there's a bit of that kind of created heroine. She's brilliant. She's feisty. She's an independent woman with her own means in a man's world. There's a bit of that. Once she makes up her mind, she's true. She's the best of all femininity. No, hang on. Well, can I? So it's a tell, not show. It's like, can I make my own mind up about what she does? And then, having said that, right now I'm going to give away a bit of the plot. So if you don't want to know, then look away now. So she's painted as this great character, is our dear Alice. The best of all females. She was going out with her cousin George Vassover, but he does something. He's a bit wild. Is George. Again, he doesn't show us. He just tells us. So I left to kind of imply, and then we kind of like, maybe it's a bit of a drink or something, or maybe it's for the ladies or something. I think it's for the ladies. So he's a bit wild. It said, no, we know he's a bit wild, but he's interesting. So I think she was engaged to him. I've forgotten that bit. Well, they were together. I think they were engaged, but he's a naughty boy, and it's kind of okay that kind of breaks up, and she's kind of forgiven for that because it was his fault. Then she comes across this Mr. Grey. I don't know how she comes across him, because their paths cross, and she's engaged to him. So she's engaged to him. He's a very upstanding guy, but the clue is he's called Mr. Grey. So there's a bit of the Dickens clues in the name thing. So it's kind of implied that he's boring. His estate's boring. There's no views. She wants to be in town. She wants to be in London. But that's just kind of breezed over a bit. Not a big play of it. So she throws over Gray. We don't see it, but basically it's kind of, but it's for your good, Mr. Gray, because I'm not good enough for you. It's not your fault, it's me. Okay? And Gray. So the relatives are a bit annoyed with her for doing this. It's not the done thing, you promised him. A girl shouldn't do that. So there's a bit of all that, and she's like, ooh, well. So once she's done that, so this is the thing, this is the bit that I don't like. Mr. Trollope says, the minute she's turned down Gray, she realises the error of her ways and immediately knows that that she loves him and she would have been the right man for her. But it's too late now, she's given a word. She's given a word that she's not given a word. Okay? Right, so she's been a silly Billy, but yeah, so that's the end of that. So she's broken up from Gray. Her relatives think she's a bit of a twit, but she's got her own independent money. Now we'll talk about the life and times at the time. But anyway, so look back to the story. So she then goes on holiday with her two cousins, George and sister Kate. Kate twists her arm to kind of get back with George, and she, Alice thinks he needs my money to get into Parliament. That'll be quite good, but he's a bit of a rogue. So anyway, she says she'll marry George. It's all a bit strange. It's done by letter and what have you. So yeah, I'll marry George. He can have my money. And Mr. Gray, it's not good enough for me, but it would be the right thing to let George have my money. Right. So she's now back. So she was with him, then went to the other, and now she's back with him. But now she's thinking, I should have gone with that Gray, but it's too late. I've been a bad girl and, anyway. So there's all that. Then, so basically, what I think's happened is that the writer has kind of put himself into a corner. He's created this character that's supposedly brilliant, this Alice, but she isn't really brilliant, but he can't carry on because she'll look bad. So he basically parks her as a character. She don't really do much now. And we get in Glencora, so Glencora turns up and she's a bit more wild. She's nice, but wild, yeah. So she then has the kind of the ups and downs of the vicissitude of life, because Alice can't, because her character is supposedly fixed. Now, Glencora's story is that she was in love with Burgo, but Burgo's wild and he's got no money. He hasn't got the proverbial pot, not a penny to his name. He lives off all his relatives, but he's the most handsome man that ever existed. People look at him and it's kind of, my gosh, that is a handsome man. What a beautiful man. And wherever he goes, people love him for being handsome and stuff like that. Glencora, about 19, is supposedly going to marry him, but he's got no money and she's got a lot. So her relatives, we don't see this, have taken her off and gone, no, you don't want him. He'll spend all your money. It'll be terrible. He'll beat you up. It'll be terrible. Yeah. So she then gives up her dreams of marrying Burgo for love and is put together with one of the Pallisers, Mr. Palliser. And he is an MP and he's building towards Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's the coming man in Parliament. So Glencora's so Glencora is not happy. She didn't marry the person that she loved, and Burgo is trying to get her back and trying to get her to run off with him. And he sends her a note, and she's kind of considering it. Will I? Won't I? She comes clean to Alice, who says, that would be disgusting, Glencora, if you did that. That's not what ladies do. And Glencora's like, well, why shouldn't I? I love him and blah, blah, blah. So she's wondering whether to do that. Alice grasses Glencora up to her relatives. So Glencora is convinced not to go to this party where Burgo is, and we think it's kind of filtering to a bit of a backwater. And yeah, then Mr. Trollope brings in the I think, supposedly the comic relief of Miss Greenow, and she's off in Norfolk. She's a widow, she's always in black and crying, but she's still attractive, and she's now got loads of money. So there's a bit of a battle for, to try and capture her with Belfield, who's got no money but a bit of a charming dandy, lies about his war experience, and Cheeseacre, who is a bit of a plump Norfolk farmer. So I'll just break up here for the kind of the background. Now, like a lot of novels at the time, it's all about the kind of it's all about ranks and aristocracy. So this is the same. The maids and coachmen make brief appearances. There's a groom for a horse at some point, so they make a bit of an appearance, but they're always a bit pathetic. They're always a bit of a caricature, a bit dopey, a bit kind of, randomly scared or whatever. So you don't see any of these. So when they're in the horse and carriages, you've got no idea he's driving the horse and carriage. You've got no idea that they're out in the rain and they're inside. They just do not appear hardly anywhere. And it's which really affects the morality of the book. So you're supposed to, look on Cheeseacre as this fat farmer. Oh, he's always going on about his money. He's always going on about his money, how he, what he does this and he does that, which is a load of tosh, because every single character in the book goes on about how much money that they get a year without earning a penny of it. There's no idea where any of this money comes from. It's just estates or money or left to them by long dead relatives generations back. Nobody earns a bean. And they look down on the one person in the book who actually earns a living, this farmer. They don't look down. They say that they're looking down on him because he mentions money, but they're looking down on him because he works for a living. And that is, working for a living. So, yeah, that's a bit, it's a bit, it kind of just ups, to me, it just kind of it just puts a negative against all the characters. Oh, you're a heroine? Well, what are you doing for the poor? You don't even mention any of these people. What? So, yeah, so there is that kind of background to it. Right, okay, so we're kind of there. Then, right, so back to the book. Alice realises that George is a bit of a wrong-un. He's thinking about bumping off his granddad to get the money, which he feels he deserves. Then we see some minor characters. George is trying to get into Parliament and he has to pay his way in. So he has to go and see some pub landlord or some lawyer, and they're not aristocracy, and they have names like Scrubby and Smelly Pants or whatever. So, they're grubby. They're grubby people, and you just kind of think, come on. Anyway, so there's a bit of that. Right, where were we? So, so Alice is now stuck. She don't love George, but she's going to have to marry George. But conveniently, she kind of gets her way out of that because George realises that she doesn't love him, so he's kind of throwing her over, and it's kind of a bit of breaking up and all the rest of it. They occasionally go walking over moors, but there's no kind of, you don't really feel that you're there at the moor. You're not kind of, it's just they're walking over the moors now type stuff. Right, so then we're back with Glencora. So basically, the four main characters are 5 main characters. There's Alice, who's, a bit supposedly idealistic, but a character can't really go anywhere. She's married to Gray. He's very upstanding, but his character can't go anywhere, so he's a bit boring. You've got Glencora, who's a bit wild, so she kind of becomes almost the main character of things happen to. Her husband is boring as well, and George is a bit wild. George kind of loses it and kind of disappears. So he disappears out. So he carried the story for a bit. These fools around Greenacre, whatever, Cheeseacre, Greenhow and Belfield, they carry the silliness of the book for a bit, but they're kind of going to dip out. So we're back to kind of Glencora. The turning point of the book is that Glencora's wondering whether to run off with Burgo. Burgo thinks he's in with a chance. They're at a ball. She dances with him in front of everybody, and it's kind of like, is she going to go? Is she not going to go? Palliser has gone home, leaving her to it because he trusts her. But then, he's got, people come and tell him, hang on, you need to get back to the party. So he comes back, sees her, Burgo chickens out, clears off without a penny to his name. And Glencora goes back with Palliser and says, look, I'm stuck here. I'll stick with you, but I loved Burgo. I always will love Burgo. I was married against my wishes. I considered throwing myself off a bridge. I'm really not happy. Downstairs is a Member of Parliament about to offer Palliser the Chancellor of the Exchequer job. He's going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's been working to it all his life. And he says, so she's just said, I don't love you, I love somebody else. I know you're going to get offered this job, but I'm thinking of throwing myself under the bridge. Oh, hang on, I forgot. They've tried. She hasn't been able to deliver him a child as well. So he goes like this. I know you don't love me. I know you didn't love me. I know you married me for family pressure. You've told me all that. You've said that you were considering running away. You've said, you can't give me a child. But none of that bothers me. I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to say, I'm not going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm going to take you, my young wife, because I love you, and we're going to travel Europe for a year, and I'm going to put all thoughts of politics away forever to look after you. And she's like, what, really, after all I've said? And he's like, yes, that's the type of man I am. This kind of fever dream, Victor, yeah. So completely forgives her. So she's like, all right. She doesn't say, oh no, you go become Chancellor of the Exchequer. And he says, bring your mate Alice. Okay. So there was some walks round the Abbey, and he told Alice off that his wife was out and that, she might have caught a cold and all the rest of it. So anyway, yeah. So she goes, brilliant. So he goes downstairs, said, I'm not going to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm taking my wife off. Don't ask. And he's like, all right. Okay, good man. So they then go off to Europe. So, and Gray calls on her and says, I heard you broke up with George. I know you said you were not going to marry me, but I'll see you in Europe. So they then go off to Europe. Glencora's doing a bit of up and down. She tries a bit of gambling. She tries, she's a bit daft. So there's a bit of that. And Palliser is, you can't behave like that, Glencora. It's not the done thing. So there's a bit of that. Not too dramatic. And then it's kind of like, where's this book going to go? But Gray turns up and starts working on Alice. And miracle of miracles, Glencora now finds herself pregnant, and now she's happy that she's got something to do. She could possibly give him an heir. And then we kind of, go towards the end of the book, and there's kind of supposedly a biggish scene where he's worked on her, and then he says, right, before we go back, I want a meeting with you, Alice. And he says, you need to forgive yourself. I've forgived you. You're wonderful. Marry me. I'm the boss. You're not going to do as you're told. And she's like, I give in. I give in to my new master type stuff, like Victorian type stuff. So, and that's almost basically it. So they're then heading back. They see Burgo again and give him some money. They're going to now head back to England, But Gray, this steadfast person who's as boring as, but really he's an upstanding character. There's a bit of the, kind of Pride and Prejudice. It was Lizzie Bennet is, no, I'm going to marry for love, not for money. And at the end of the book, just happen to marry the richest man in England, don't I? So Alice Vavasour wants to be in London, doesn't want a boring life, wants to be kind of involved with a man who's involved in politics. Guess what happens to Gray? Palliser fix him up with an MP's job, and Alice Vavasour is now going to spend half the year in London being an MP's wife, entertaining, and half the year back in the countryside. It's just all a lucky, happy coincidence. So, 3 broken engagements, changing her mind, and the minute she changes her mind, she's realised the error of her way. But yeah, so that's the kind of book. So yeah, but as a book, it's not as humorous as Pride and Prejudice. The bad guy George is nowhere near as bad as Mr. Hyde in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The comedy characters Greenough and Cheesacre are nowhere near the comedy characters in Jane Austen novels. So it's a bit rather than so. Can you forgive her? Yeah. Is there anything I've forgotten? Yeah. So just I'll come back to the kind of the self-awareness thing. So there's after Burgo, so he's beautiful. There's a strange kind of little mini scene where he's left the party. He's now got nowhere to go. He's got a few pence in his pocket, and he's walking the streets, and he meets this young girl. She'd probably be only about 17, an urchin, and you're kind of thinking, what's going on here? And she was beautiful when she was younger, but now she's looking dirty, whatever, and she's basically begging for money, and he's like, well, she's going to be taking it for gin, and he says to her, you should have food really rather than drink. So basically, Burgo, this older guy, takes her to the pub, buys her a meal. Now, I don't know what the author is trying to tell us with that. Is Burgo nice? It's just, Burgo has never earned a penny in his life. He's filching. He's got nothing. He's got no redeeming qualities apart from, well, he's entertaining, what have you, but he doesn't create anything, doesn't do anything. The character kind of comes and goes. I don't know what Trollope is wanting us to kind of think from this kind of little minor scene. He pays for this woman to have a meal, and then she's going to clear off. She appears briefly again later on for no apparent reason, but Burgo don't earn anything. He's given this kind of street urchin a meal, and then he kind of wanders off and leaves her, and she says, "Oh, what a beautiful man! What could you do with something like that?" It's just a bit kind of like, almost like, is Mr. Trollope self-aware? He's obviously still around and he's done very, very well for himself, but it's kind of like, what? Yeah, I'll probably think of something else, but I've gone on way too long, haven't I? I hope you're reading something great.